think that Counter Fairy is a really interesting deck. When you think about it, Counter Fairy is the counter to the counter deck that's countering the meta. Talk about all those counters, and I don't even have enough tokens or things to represent those counters, right? Alright, I'll stop right there. But if you really put it in perspective, Going Second Spiral was a deck built to counter the meta, and Counter Fairy counters Counter Spiral pretty well, so put it all on the counter and let's duel. Alright, that was pretty terrible again, alright? But I'm TheCaliEffect, and if you guys want to see more videos like this, then go ahead and destroy that subscribe button. But more importantly, if you have 5 counter traps and a bountiful Artemis on the field, go ahead and hit that notification bell, because we just too strong. Without further ado, I present to you a Counter Fairy deck profile for the January 2018 format. Alright guys, so we're going to be starting off with the monsters. 3 copies of Bountiful Artemis. Now this card is really good, possibly the best monster in the deck, if not already the best monster. It does not activate, so cards like Majesty's Fiend or Divine Wrath can't stop this card because it's a continuous effect, like I said, and every time you were to activate a counter trap card, immediately after that counter trap card resolves, draw 1 card. Now 3 copies of Guiding Ariadne. It looks like Bountiful Artemis, beautiful. But it looks like Bountiful Artemis counterpart. While it's in the pin scale, you do not have to pay for cost for your counter trap cards that include discarding cards or paying life points. The best thing about it though is when it's destroyed, you get to select 3 counter trap cards from your deck, reveal them to your opponent picks 1 and adds it to your hand. Now normally this isn't as reliable as its first effect of not the cost, but in this deck we kind of find a way to make it work. 2 copies of Minerva, Scholar of the Sky. Now this card is really good when you look at it. Every time a counter trap is activated, it gains 500 attack permanently. And if Sanctuary of the Sky is on the field, you get to tutor a counter trap card from your graveyard to your hand. Now I don't like the fact that a Sanctuary of the Sky has to be on the field, but it's a really good card nonetheless. It's actually going to probably be our biggest monster, especially after 3 counter traps. He's almost invincible. 2 copies of Power Angel Valkyria. I thought that this card was completely madness, mainly because at the cost of negating an opponent's card, you get to search a fairy monster, which means your Bountiful Artemis, your Guiding Ariadne, your Minerva, Scholar of the Sky, but unfortunately you have to negate a card effect. And that's not how all counter traps work, but nonetheless, I think that this card is still a really awesome card and is still tutorable through Ties of the Brother. 1 copy of Barrier Statue of the Heavens. Now this card was actually, I was on Dueling Network just playing out the deck, and somebody suggested that I play Barrier Statue of the Heavens inside of this deck, and I thought about it, I was like, this card's terrible because I don't have anything to protect it, but if I can get a way to protect it, then this card's pretty much a threat. I mean, the only deck that it would have a problem with is Trickstars, and I only play 1 copy, so I could just not summon it when I ties or just side it out. So it worked out pretty well. Card's really awesome at shutting down the opponent. Next is 2 copies of the card I hate. And when I mean I hate this card, I don't necessarily think it's terrible. Yeah, I think it's pretty terrible. 2 copies of Honest. Now, Honest actually serves so many purposes inside of this deck, I just could not hate it. I was debating on running Stormy Mirror Force, Quaking Mirror Force, Drowning Mirror Force, or just Mirror Force. And I didn't like either of those, mainly because of the slowness of Mirror Force and the fact that I would have to hard draw the Mirror Force and set it and then wait for my opponent to attack. Now, Honest is a little bit different. Not only is it a Ties of the Brethren target, that's right, check those stats. It's a level 4 light fairy. It can special summon your other monsters to your side of the field, but it can also bring itself back to your hand to secure that battle that you need. I really like Honest in this specific deck, and it also works well with Barrier Statue of the Heavens, so I was like, it just works really well within this build. The 2 spicy cards that I have in here is 2 copies of Luster Pendulum, the Draco Slayer. And I know you guys are kind of scratching your head, but then you'll start to realize that not only is Luster Pendulum Draco Slayer a 5 scale, meaning that I have access to Pendulum Summon all of my monsters in Case High brick, but more importantly, it can destroy Guiding Ariadne, adding another copy from the deck to the hand and trigger its effect. And don't forget, you can Pendulum Summon that Guiding Ariadne worst case scenario. This card is really good to the deck. The only problem that I'm having is consistently getting it to the hand, but we already have ways to search that out. So On to the next card. The last monster we play is Sacred Arc Air Knight Parshav. I thought that this card was so good into the strategy, and then I soon realized that you only needed one copy. Mainly, while it was good, it was next near to impossible to summon. You needed fairy monsters in your graveyard, which don't happen mid-game, or you can summon it through the trap card, which requires a lot of setup. But if you do summon this card, not only can it tour Parshav cards, but counter trap cards from your deck to your hand, and all it has to do is inflict damage. Plot twist, it also inflicts piercing damage on top of its 2,800 body, so it's a pretty good card. So that's it for the monster lineups at what I believe is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 16. For the spells, 3 copies of Card of Demise. Now, there are quite a few times where Card of Demise does run in conflict with Ties of the Brethren, but it is too good to not run either copies of these cards, and more often than not, after you resolve Ties once, the other ones become dead. But Card of Demise is never dead. It's just a really good card, being able to draw 3 cards after you set all your back row and set up. Next is 3 copies of course, Ties of the Brethren. This card actually provides a little more leeway. It says for the rest of the turn, you cannot special summon. So you can Pendulum Summon Guiding Ariadne, which is a target for Ties, and then Ties of Brethren, your Guiding Ariadne for the monsters that you need. Now, it does cost you 2,000 life points, and you must skip your battle phase, but this deck kind of like needs that. Next is 2 copies of Pot of Desires. I'm really iffy about this card. I like Pot of Desires as an overall card, but my biggest problem with Desires is that it's starting to feel like every single card in this deck matters. And I don't play it assess amount of trap cards because I'm not trying to lose going second, but Pot of Desires is one of those cards where you can banish cards more often, or not more often than not. There are sometimes you can banish cards that would really suck to banish. So be really careful of using Pot of Desires. But most of the time I was playing, it was on Dueling Book, and Dueling Book isn't the best for ratios. So I would Pot of Desires and then draw into a Pot of Desires, and I'm like, all right. Or open double Pot of Desires like multiple times in a row, and I'm like, all right, seems fair. That's how you counter fairy. You get pair cans. Next is 2 copies of the Sanctum of Parshath. Now, this card I probably will drop down to 1, if not 0, because while it has some awesome effects, I just don't think that it's really needed. The real true MVP of this deck is Minerva, Scholar of the Sky, and that's why I run it. And it's searchable through Parshath, so it's a really good card. Those are really good arguments for it, but in the competitive scene, needing so many cards that are unsearchable from your deck to your hand to resolve them all, not really that great. But through testing, I actually found that this card was pretty good. I run 2 copies in case one gets banished with Desires, and it also protects my back row. So at the very worst, it's a great sideboard card. I'm gonna leave it up to you guys, or if you guys want to play this card, or you can completely drop it. It's a 42 card deck, so do whatever you want. Next is the next spicy tech is 2 copies of Duelist Alliance. Now, you guys are probably still scratching your like, why the fuck are you playing Duelist Alliance? Until you realize that Luster Pendulum is a pendulum monster, and you can search it with Duelist Alliance. So what you do is you activate Guiding Ariadne in the Scale, and then you activate Duelist Alliance to search your Luster Pin. Activate your Luster Pin in your Scale, destroy Guiding Ariadne, show your opponent 3 counter trap cards, which are probably going to be Ultimate Providences. Get the Ultimate Providence, and then Pendulum Summon the Guiding Ariadne to your side of the field. Not to mention your other cards that you have in your hand could be deadly. So I really like Duelist Alliance in this build. It hasn't really... the ratio hasn't really been cloggy, the 2-2 ratio, but I haven't had, well, actually I did play test this quite a bit, but it was just pretty good. Let's just put it that way. I really like the synergy that the deck had going on. So that's it for the spells. I believe the spells are 12. For the traps are going to be pretty standard for counter fairy. 3 copies of Rebirth of Parshav. This is easily the best counter trap card in the deck, mainly because not only does it negate cards, I mean, it does have kind of a hefty cost, but I mean, if you have Ariadne in the Scale, it doesn't matter. Not only does it negate cards, it summons monsters from your deck or your extra deck to your side of the field, which could be the presence that you need to stop your opponent from either getting over you or just providing a big body presence that you need to get over your opponent's card. Excuse me. Next is going to be 3 copies of Ultimate Providence. I have a quick story about this card. I actually bought them at Sneak Peek for hype price, which I believe was 20 bucks each. Unfortunately, the card fell to shit afterwards, but In hindsight, because hindsight's already 2020, I really thought that this card was really good, and I'm actually pretty happy to see this card have some type of shine in type of a deck. So basically what Ultimate Providence does is if your opponent activates a monster spell or trap effect, you discard the according card to negate the activation and destroy it. But it doesn't matter if you have Guiding Ariadne in your scale, you won't have to pay the cost. So even if you have 0 cards in your hand, you're still able to activate Ultimate Providence as long as you have Guiding Ariadne in your pendulum scale. Next is 3 copies of Solemn Strike. Solemn Strike is, it negates monster effects. I wanted to play Divine Ref until I realized Solemn Strike's just better. Let's just face it. Unfortunately, I don't have ulti strike, so this deck would be max rarity YOLO swag, too cool, countering the meta, but I'm working on those ulti strikes, and if you guys have some, send them your way to your boy. 2 copies of Drastic Drop Off. This card's very interesting. The reason why I say that is because a lot of decks search, so when your opponent searches that pivotal card that they need, has to drop off them. And then you'll be able to gain the effect of your Bountiful Artemis. Now, this is where actually it messed me up because you cannot gain the effect of Power Valkyria, but it's still a really good card in disrupting your opponent. 1 copy of Solemn Warning. Solemn Warning is just a really good card. Why not play it? It negates summon 2,000 life points, and it negates spell or trap effects or monster effects to summon. Next is 2 copies of Evenly Matched, and that's the 41st and 42nd card. I have a really good theory about Evenly Matched into this deck, and I'll be able to explain it to you guys right now. The theory is, so let's say I go second and I open Evenly Matched. My opponent already has an established board. It's really hard for Counter Fairy to set their board. So I evenly match my opponent, make them banish all their cards, and then I can set up my board. Losing my battle phase, I guess that's kind of bad, but it's like, whatever. I also won't be able to activate Ties of Brethren, but more often than not, my opponent sets a nasty board. I probably wasn't playing Yu-Gi-Oh, so Evenly Matched is really good in that aspect. Also, this deck is notorious for running out of resource. Let's check the stats. Seriously, I know I'm a little late, but let's check this deck's stats. Its attack, okay. Its defense, okay. Its consistency, pretty good. And its power is going to be replaced with Disruption. Its disruption is fucking good. So being able to lose your board and then evenly match your opponent because you lost your board, not only on top of the cards that you already negated from them, probably put them in the same position as you. So if you're top decking, they're probably top decking too, which is a good way to play Counter Fairy, because if you're top decking and your opponent isn't, you're not winning that game. So that's going to sum up the main board at 42 cards. Again, you can take out the Parshaft spell card if you'd like to bring it down to 40. I'm personally still 50-50 in it. Next for the extra deck is of course 2 copies of Avenging Knight Parshaft. Now before people start looking at me crazy, no, you're right, you cannot synchro summon for this card. But where is that card? Rebirth of Parshaft allows you to special summon 1 Parshaft monster from your deck or extra deck to your side of the field. And the fact that we don't necessarily use our extra deck very heavy, summoning this monster is pretty good. It changes monsters' attacks, it does a whole bunch of things. It's a nice solid card for free, so it's why not? Why not summon cards for free? Next is Ignister. This card is summoned through the True Draco card, and again, I'm just gonna iterate, this deck doesn't really need the extra deck. There's no specific card that you like, oh my god, need. I guess other than Parshaft inside of this extra deck. So 1 Dinoster, 1 Akashic Magician, 1 Borlo Bragan. I've actually made this after I ties, I summoned another monster, and I was like, fuck, I can't get over your monsters with these monsters. Let's make a Borlo. Biko Balker, just big and back, being boo, styling and profiling and wilding with them pointy arrows. 1 copy of Majesty, Pegasus, Paladin, Ascending Draco Slayer. I like this card. It's just a really good call. Another card that I invested in, I put up 20 bucks into this card, wound up not panning out, but I thought this card was godly when it first came out. 1 Castell, you can play it. 1 Tornado Dragon, great at back row destruction. The Utopia package, of course, being able to beat over high level monsters. Diamond Direwolf, Bujintai Tsukiyomi, and Abyss Dweller. That is going to sum up the extra deck at 15. If you guys see me playing 16 or 13 cards, then feel free to adjust, unless you can get away with playing 16. I'm not telling you to cheat, but if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. At least that's what my coach told me. For the sideboard, the sideboard's a little different because when I lose or win game 1, or when I lose game 1, I expect to go second. So yes, those hand traps are coming in. 3 copies of Ash Blossom, 3 copies of Ghost Ogre, 1 copy of Maxine. Now these hand traps, like I said, they're coming in when game 2, when I know I'm going second, and I'm gonna ruin my opponent. If my opponent's playing going second Spiral, they're probably gonna tell me to go first again. because they don't run enough going first cards unless they can find a way to side out all their hand traps, which probably might ruin their day because then I'll play in cards that matter. But still, nonetheless, these cards are pretty good for going second, and they allow you to go second when your opponent forces you to. Of course, the third copy of Evenly Matched. And then the rest of the cards are really spicy text. I'm not 100% confident into this extra deck, but I think that it's going places, you know what I mean? So 3 copies of Unwavering Bonds for the Pendulum matchup. Not only is it a counter trap, it negates their card effects no matter where they go. So I thought that was pretty cool. 2 copies of Debunk. Debunk hits graveyard effects and hand effects. It hits every hand trap, obviously. Does it hit evenly match, or is it just monsters? Yeah, it's an effect monster, so it doesn't hit evenly match. It hits all of the hand traps. It hits Cosmo cards. I don't know why I'm like playing for Cosmo cards. I don't play for non-tier 1 decks, but it hits so many problematic cards in the hand and graveyard, and it also hits a lot of rogue options. These last 2 cards are a spicy, too much sauce tech, but they're really only good in the mirror match. I'm going to give you guys that. 2 copies of Retort. Not only is Retort a counter trap card, it's not a card that you want to open with because Retort requires you to have your same counter trap card or spell card in your graveyard. But if you can get off Retort against the opponent, not only can you negate their cards like Rebirth of Parshath, Drastic Drop-Off, Solemn Strike, you get to add the copy to your hand. So imagine being able to negate their pivotal Parshath card after they paid the cost, adding your Parshath card back to your hand, and then resolving the effects of your counter fairy monsters, giving you more advantage. This card will outright win you the game in the mirror match, at least in my opinion. Thank you guys so much for watching into the segment of the TheCaliEffect. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys would like to support the #1 channel in the history of the universe, that's right, I said the fucking universe, go ahead and counter fairy your way to my Patreon. I have some awesome rewards, and just $1 gets you into some pretty dope shit, like watching me make videos like this. Thank you guys again so much for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, but most of all, enjoy.